35 blocks. Between 100 and 300 dead. 10,000 people without homes. 18 hours. And every single insurance claim denied. Not because the claims were invalid, because someone chose a specific word to describe what happened. One word, chosen before sunrise on June 1st, 1921. And that word voided every policy, closed every lawsuit, and erased the wealthiest black community in America from Oklahoma's school textbooks for the next 75 years. The word was riot. This is what that word did. By the morning of June 1st, 1921, the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma would be gone. But before that morning, it was the wealthiest black community in America. 600 businesses within a single district, a hospital, 2 newspapers, a hotel, pharmacies, law offices. Black residents had been legally barred from white commercial districts. They couldn't open a business there, couldn't enter through the front door. So they built their own. The money stayed inside Greenwood instead of draining out. And what grew was something the rest of Tulsa could see from across town. Journalists called it Black Wall Street. That was not a metaphor. It was a precise description of what existed there, before 18 hours erased it. Dr. A.C. Jackson ran the Frissell Memorial Hospital on Greenwood Avenue. Mayo Clinic described him, in the language of that era, as one of the most able Negro surgeons in the United States. What that meant was simple. He was one of the best surgeons in the country. He practiced in Greenwood because that was the only place he was permitted to practice. On the morning of June 1st, 1921, A.C. Jackson walked out of his front door with his hands raised. He had surrendered. He was shot dead in his yard. By noon, the hospital was gone. All 600 businesses were gone. 35 blocks. Ash. The Dreamland Theatre, gone. The law offices of B.C. Franklin and his partners, who had spent years fighting for their clients inside a legal system that barely acknowledged them, gone. The Stradford Hotel, the most prominent black-owned hotel in the state, gone. The Tulsa Star and Oklahoma Sun newsrooms, both black-owned, gone. The pharmacies and grocery stores and beauty parlors that had served families for a generation, gone. Every one of those institutions had been built against resistance. Every lease negotiated, every permit approved only after pressure. Every building financed through community networks because the banks would not lend. The capital that built Black Wall Street was accumulated slowly, over decades, through work that the wider economy refused to recognize or reward. None of that history survived the morning of June 1st. All of it destroyed in 18 hours. And none of it, not $1, ever compensated. The event that triggered it began the day before. Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old shoe shiner, was arrested in Tulsa on May 31st. The charge? Assault on a white elevator operator named Sarah Page. The two had worked in the same building for months. She operated the elevator he used daily to reach his workplace 1 floor up. The Tulsa Tribune ran a story that afternoon. 1 paragraph. Almost no verified facts. The headline, in the language of 1921 Tulsa, as later reported by eyewitnesses and historians, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator." That paragraph was the spark. What came next was the system. What exactly happened in that elevator between Dick Rowland and Sarah Page has never been established. Page declined to press charges. Rowland was released. The 2001 Oklahoma Commission concluded the most probable explanation was an accident, a stumble, a grabbed arm. The story that destroyed Greenwood was built on a paragraph about an incident that was never proven. The May 31st edition of the Tulsa Tribune, the one that ran that headline, has been removed from every microfilm archive that should contain it. The page was gone. Historians identified the absence in the 1970s. No one has ever been required to explain what happened to it. By the time any of that was established, Greenwood had been gone for 80 years. When black residents heard that Rowland had been arrested and that a white crowd was gathering outside the courthouse, some of them armed themselves and went to the courthouse. A shot was fired, by whom the record does not definitively establish. And what followed was not a spontaneous disorder. What followed was an organized assault. White civilians and men in law enforcement uniforms, some carrying deputization papers signed that night by Tulsa's police commissioner, moved through the streets of Greenwood with rifles, pistols, and machine guns. They set fire to buildings in a pattern the fire marshal's report later described as consistent with deliberate ignition at multiple simultaneous points. They pulled residents from their homes. They shot people in the street. They looted before they burned. The Oklahoma National Guard was mobilized. The men they sent to protect the neighborhood participated in burning it. This is documented. This is in the 2001 Oklahoma Commission report. Approximately 6,000 black residents were rounded up at gunpoint and interned in Convention Hall and the fairgrounds, held by the same men who had spent the previous hours burning their neighborhood. While those 6,000 people were interned, their homes were looted. Accounts entered into the 2001 Commission record describe white residents loading furniture, clothing, and household goods from Greenwood homes into trucks, while the owners sat detained at the fairgrounds. The looting was documented. It occurred in daylight. Under the watch of the same authorities who had classified the assault as a riot, requiring police response. If you built everything you own with your own hands, and one morning you came back and it was gone, what would you do? The residents of Greenwood came back. They rebuilt. Within 10 years, Greenwood existed again. Smaller, but present. The people who had built Black Wall Street once built it twice. But the city of Tulsa was not done. City officials moved to rezone the Greenwood District for industrial use, officially while the ash was still warm. B.C. Franklin, the attorney whose law office had burned, filed legal challenges from a tent on the rubble. The rezoning was blocked. The community kept its land. What could not be rebuilt was the official record of what happened to them. And then there are the airplanes. Eyewitnesses whose testimony was entered into the 2001 Oklahoma Commission record described seeing aircraft flying low over Greenwood during the attack. Some described being shot at from the air. Some described seeing incendiary materials dropped. The official military record states, "Observation only, no armament." The Commission's conclusion, the eyewitness testimony is credible and cannot be dismissed. The military record cannot be independently verified. Both documents exist simultaneously in the official record. That question has not been officially closed. It was left open by the Commission. Deliberately or not, it remains open. Dick Rowland was never convicted. The charges were dropped in July 1921. Sarah Page declined to prosecute. Rowland left Tulsa shortly after and was never heard from again. The residents of Greenwood filed insurance claims. hundreds of them. Homes, businesses, goods destroyed, buildings burned. The insurance companies denied every single one. The basis? Oklahoma authorities had classified the event as a riot. Standard policies of the era contained riot exclusion clauses. One word, chosen before dawn, before the fires were even out, had closed every legal avenue simultaneously. The people of Greenwood had no ground left to stand on. The city of Tulsa helped. It sent bills to the survivors, formal invoices for debris removal. The residents of Greenwood, who had just watched their homes and businesses burn, received written demands from the city to pay for clearing the ash of what had been done to them. Not the men who lit the fires. The people who had lived there. The total assessed value of the property destroyed in Greenwood was estimated at the time at between $1.5 and $2 million, roughly $30 million in current terms. The insurance industry applied the riot exclusion uniformly and without exception. Not one claim resulted in compensation. Not one company reconsidered the classification. The legal instrument created on the night of May 31st worked precisely as intended. Olivia Hooker was 6 years old on the morning of June 1, 1921. She watched men come through her family's house. She watched them destroy her mother's china. She watched them take what they wanted and burn what they could not carry. She survived. She became the first African-American woman to enlist in the United States Coast Guard. She earned a PhD in psychology from Columbia. She testified before Congress. She was interviewed by historians and filmmakers well into her 90s. She spent the last decades of her life asking the state of Oklahoma to formally acknowledge what she had watched at the age of 6. She died in November 2018. She was 103 years old. The state never answered. There is a specific detail that does not appear in most accounts of this story. The reason the death toll remains uncertain, somewhere between 100 and 300, is that many of the bodies were never officially recorded. The 2001 Commission report includes accounts of bodies dumped in the Arkansas River, accounts of mass burials in unmarked locations. In 2019, the city of Tulsa commissioned a formal forensic investigation. In 2020 and 2021, archaeologists identified potential mass grave sites under parking lots and vacant lots in North Tulsa. Excavation is ongoing. The people who died in Greenwood on June 1, 1921, are still being counted. 103 years later, archaeologists are digging up parking lots, looking for them. The record in order. 1921. Greenwood is destroyed. Every insurance claim denied. 10,000 people billed for cleaning up what was done to them. 1921 to 1996. The event is removed from Oklahoma school textbooks. 75 years. An entire generation of Oklahomans grows up without knowing it happened. 1996. Oklahoma legislation first acknowledges the event. 75 years later. Most of the survivors are already dead. 2001. The Commission publishes its report. 178 pages. Recommends reparations. Notes that some survivors are still alive. Recommends moving quickly. 2003. Oklahoma Supreme Court dismisses survivor lawsuits. The ruling? Too much time has passed. 2019. Forensic investigation begins. Potential mass graves found under parking lots in North Tulsa. 2021. 3 survivors testify before Congress. Viola Fletcher is 107 years old. She says, "I have been fighting for justice my whole life." 2023. Lessie Randle, Mother Randle, dies at 109. She is a named plaintiff in active litigation at the time of her death. The Oklahoma Supreme Court dismisses the case weeks later. The ruling: without a living plaintiff who can demonstrate specific, ongoing harm, the case cannot proceed. The system did not deny the massacre. It waited. It filed appeals. It moved slowly through courts while the witnesses aged. And when the last one died, it ruled that her death was the reason the case was over. Riot is a word with a built-in legal effect. It does not describe what happened in Greenwood. It describes what the classification was designed to do to every claim, every lawsuit, every textbook that came after. The fire marshal documented simultaneous ignition points across the district. The guard interned survivors. The insurance companies applied the classification and denied every single claim. The word was chosen before dawn by people who understood exactly what it would accomplish. Oklahoma removed the story from its schools, not because it was too painful, because it was too legible. The legal and historical record of what happened in Greenwood was not hidden inside a government vault. The 2001 Oklahoma Commission report is publicly available. 178 pages. The survivor testimonies are in there. The fire marshal's pattern analysis is in there. The National Guard participation is in there. The aircraft witness accounts are in there. The insurance denial mechanism is in there. The eminent domain attempt is in there. Everything that happened in Greenwood was documented by the state that chose not to teach it. The last plaintiff died while the case was still open. How many more stories is the system waiting out right now? The next investigation is about a government program that did not wait for a disaster to use. It built one from scratch, against its own citizens, on its own soil, in peacetime. Not with fire, with letters, with surveillance, with rumors planted carefully enough to make people doubt their own memory. Unlike Greenwood, there was no microfilm page removed, no textbook edited. They kept everything, every file, every note, every operation log. Because they were not ashamed of what they had built. They were proud of it. That file is next.